I'm not looking for trouble with you, Marshal. This Jerry here has got me all riled up, him and that girl.
I don't know. But I'll tell you something, Doc. You better not mess around with Nades there.
What did Ken Curtis finally reveal about the life behind the scruffy cowboy voice that captured millions, and why did his confession shock fans decades after Festus became a legend? From hidden fears to secret ambitions, every revelation peeled back the layers Hollywood never wanted exposed. Stay with us, because the truth Curtis kept buried for decades will leave you speechless. Courage in the depths. Long before Ken Curtis found fame as Festus or explored the world of music, he faced a trial that few ever knew shaped him profoundly: his service during World War II. Curtis had volunteered for the Navy, but it was the assignment he received that would haunt him for decades: a classified submarine mission in the Pacific, perilous in ways that left permanent scars on his psyche. Unlike the laughter and lightheartedness of television, this chapter of his life was defined by silence, fear, and the constant brush with death. The mission was intense and relentless. Curtis and his crew were tasked with reconnaissance in enemy waters, navigating narrow underwater passages, and avoiding detection at all costs. Every dive carried the risk of disaster, and Curtis later confessed that the terror he felt was unlike anything he had ever imagined. He became acutely aware of the fragility of life, the invisible thread separating survival from catastrophe. This experience would remain buried, even as the world later cheered his performances on screen. Curtis's personal notes from that period, preserved in letters never sent, reveal the inner turmoil he faced. He wrote of the claustrophobia, the deafening silence punctuated by the sonar blips of nearby threats, and the anxiety of making split-second decisions that could save or doom his crew. In these private reflections, Curtis admitted to moments of sheer panic, moments he would never allow the public to imagine. The resilience he displayed, however, became a cornerstone of his character off-screen, teaching him discipline, courage, and the value of composure under pressure. The bonds he formed underwater were unlike any on land. Curtis described a camaraderie that was both unspoken and unbreakable, a trust forged in the pressure of life-or-death situations. His fellow sailors became a chosen family, each silently aware that any misstep could result in tragedy. Curtis later confessed that losing several of these men in missions haunted him, and he carried a quiet grief for friends whose names were never mentioned in newspapers or memorials. These experiences, though hidden, shaped the empathy and humility that marked his personal relationships later in life. Interestingly, Curtis's time in the Navy also fostered an unexpected skill: observation under pressure. He learned to read subtle cues, anticipate danger, and act decisively in critical moments. These abilities, honed in the depths of the ocean, would later influence his acting. The precise timing of gestures, the measured pauses in dialogue, and the careful control of voice in performance all had roots in the life-or-death awareness he developed aboard submarines. Festus's calm, deliberate demeanor had echoes of a man trained to survive in the most extreme circumstances. For years, Curtis avoided sharing these experiences publicly, fearing that they would overshadow his work or alter the audience's perception of him. Only in later interviews, prompted by deep personal reflection, did he reveal fragments of the truth. He spoke of near-death encounters with a quiet intensity, the moments when he thought the end had come, and the relief of surfacing to sunlight after days underwater. His recollections were neither boastful nor dramatized. They were candid, raw, and hauntingly human. Curtis's war experience also influenced his approach to fame and identity. He had seen mortality up close and understood the fleeting nature of life. This perspective gave him a resilience in Hollywood, a quiet strength that allowed him to endure the pressures of typecasting, personal heartbreak, and public scrutiny. The man who could face enemy torpedoes beneath the ocean waves had an inner fortitude that few ever suspected behind the laughter of Festus. By finally confessing these stories, Curtis revealed a vulnerability and courage that contrasted sharply with his public image. The war had tested his physical limits and moral courage, leaving indelible marks on his psyche. It was a truth he protected fiercely, a private crucible that defined who he was, long before television offered recognition and before music offered solace. What unseen experiences shape a person when the world only sees the surface? And how do they quietly echo through a lifetime of choices? Stay with us into the truth that was never meant to surface. The whisper that started it all. Long before Festus became a household name, Ken Curtis was just another actor navigating the unpredictable tides of Hollywood. He moved from studio to studio, auditioning for roles that rarely resonated with his true self. The young Curtis had a quiet, almost shy demeanor off-screen, making the boisterous personality he would later portray even more surprising. Few realized that the man behind the scruffy, drawling cowboy voice had spent years carefully studying how actors shaped public perception, hoping one day to find a character that truly fit him. Curtis often recalled an afternoon on a small Western set where a line was flubbed, and he added an offhand, sarcastic remark to lighten the mood. The producers overheard him, and something clicked. They insisted he try delivering future lines with that same playful, almost lazy tone. Curtis admitted in later interviews that he initially resisted. The persona felt artificial to him, and yet there was a hidden thrill in experimenting with this strange new voice. That tiny, seemingly inconsequential joke would become the foundation for his most famous identity. He also credited his childhood in Colorado and later the rugged landscapes of Hollywood backlots for shaping the authenticity of Festus's drawl. Curtis loved observing the way cowhands talked and moved, how their voices rose and fell with the rhythm of the land. He practiced in secret, mimicking accents and intonations, sometimes driving his fellow actors and crew to distraction with his constant repetition of odd phrases. These private exercises were never intended for television, but they laid the groundwork for a character that would outlive his own personal ambitions. Unexpectedly, the persona began to attract attention off-set. Directors and casting agents were intrigued by the way Curtis could switch from mild-mannered Ken to the unpredictable, gravel-voiced Festus in a heartbeat. It was almost as if the voice itself contained a magnetic force, drawing opportunities toward him that he had not sought. Curtis later admitted feeling conflicted, unsure whether he was being celebrated for his talent or simply for the quirky accident of a voice. The internal struggle between authenticity and public expectation would follow him for decades. Behind the humor and charm of Festus was a man wrestling with the sudden weight of fame. Curtis confided that the first time he realized the character had taken on a life of its own, he felt a private shock. He had created the voice in jest, never imagining that producers would demand he maintain it for years. Interviews with co-stars reveal he often felt trapped between gratitude for the recognition and disbelief at how a single improvisation had reshaped his career trajectory. That tension defined much of his early years in Hollywood. There was also an artistic side to Curtis that few audiences recognized. Before Festus, he had ambitions that extended beyond acting. Music, dance, and performance art fascinated him. Yet, the unexpected success of the character forced him to suppress other creative outlets, as producers feared anything too different might confuse viewers. In private letters, Curtis admitted feeling a quiet frustration, mourning the possibilities that his life could have taken if he had been allowed to explore his full range of talents. Interestingly, Curtis's voice was not the only element that became iconic. The physical mannerisms, the slight lean in his posture, and the slow, deliberate hand gestures all contributed to the character's authenticity. Each movement was carefully refined over years, often improvised in ways that felt natural, yet calculated. Observers later noted that even subtle nuances, such as a raised eyebrow or a small grin, conveyed volumes about Festus's personality, and Curtis had developed these without formal training or intention. The impact of this persona on Curtis's life cannot be overstated. While it brought fame and recognition, it also imposed limitations. Curtis confessed that there were moments he yearned to be seen as himself rather than the character audiences adored. Yet, in embracing Festus, he discovered a new form of artistry, a way to connect with millions while keeping a private, hidden version of himself intact. act. This delicate balance between public adoration and personal identity remained one of his most compelling and often painful secrets. The moment Curtis first heard the laughter and applause that Festus elicited, he realized something profound. A single unplanned whisper could transform a life forever. That tiny improvisation had set in motion a chain of events he could never have imagined, a domino effect that would carry through decades of performances, interviews, and personal reckonings. It was a quiet origin, almost invisible, yet it became the foundation of an enduring legend. Could a simple joke really redefine a man's entire life, steering him toward fame and obscuring his true passions? Stay with us as the mystery deepens. The secret political fire. After years of navigating personal turmoil and mastering the life of Festus, Curtis quietly harbored a dimension few ever suspected: a fierce, unspoken political consciousness. While audiences laughed at the scruffy cowboy on screen, Curtis was observing the world with a critical eye, reading newspapers obsessively, attending discreet gatherings, and forming opinions that could have jeopardized his career if ever revealed. He carried a private fire, a determination to understand the forces shaping America, even as his public persona demanded neutrality and affable humor. The first instance that hinted at this side of him occurred during a studio lunch in the late 1950s. Curtis, normally reserved in conversation, made a pointed observation about labor disputes in Hollywood that caught veteran producers off guard. Friends later recalled that he had an uncanny ability to articulate nuanced opinions without alienating anyone. Yet beneath the surface, Curtis was plotting a path where his voice, though quiet in public, might someday be heard in arenas far beyond television screens. His political involvement began cautiously, often through private correspondence and discreet contributions to campaigns. Curtis aligned himself with causes he believed in deeply, supporting efforts related to veterans' rights and cultural preservation. He insisted on anonymity, fearing that overt advocacy could clash with the wholesome, uncomplicated image of Festus. However, even in secrecy, he found a thrilling sense of purpose, a feeling that his actions mattered beyond the stage and studio. The turning point came when a major election in the early 1960s prompted Curtis to take a risk. He endorsed a candidate he felt genuinely represented values close to his heart. Friends described the tension he felt in making the decision public. Every action was scrutinized, and a misstep could alienate fans and colleagues alike. Curtis confessed years later that the experience was intoxicating and terrifying, revealing a side of himself he had long suppressed, a willingness to challenge expectations and stake a claim for his personal beliefs. Curtis also leveraged his friendships with influential actors and producers to advance discrete political initiatives. He hosted small gatherings where ideas were exchanged, strategies discussed, and support quietly mobilized. Behind the laughter of these informal social events, he became a strategist of sorts, navigating Hollywood's intricate networks to amplify causes without drawing attention to his own name. These efforts remained hidden from the public eye for decades, known only to those within his intimate circle. One of the most striking revelations came from his private diaries, in which Curtis expressed frustration over the need to constantly balance morality with popularity. He described sleepless nights pondering whether to speak out on issues he found morally urgent, knowing that any misstep could endanger his career. In these reflections, he revealed an internal battle between loyalty to his audience and loyalty to his conscience, a tension few could imagine in a man celebrated for comedic simplicity. Interestingly, Curtis's political engagement was not just about policy, it was about identity. He discovered that advocating for principles he truly believed in allowed him to reclaim parts of himself that Festus had overshadowed. It was a subtle rebellion, a way to assert autonomy over the person hidden beneath the iconic cowboy persona. Even when he returned to the set, he carried a quiet sense of triumph, knowing that behind the drawl and humor, he had claimed a space for integrity and courage. By the late 1970s, Curtis had witnessed the profound effects of his discreet political work, yet he maintained silence in public forums. Few realized the extent to which his advocacy had influenced cultural discussions within Hollywood, shaping debates on veteran affairs and representation long before such topics gained mainstream traction. Curtis's actions, largely invisible to the public, reflected a determination to make a difference without sacrificing the very career that provided him a platform. Curtis's political fire, though largely hidden, illuminated the complexity of a man who had long been underestimated. While audiences saw Festus as an affable sidekick, behind closed doors, Curtis was a strategist, thinker, and occasional rebel, balancing risk, conscience, and the need for discretion. His story reveals that fame and influence often coexist with quiet battles few ever witness, and that even a man defined by a single character can harbor untold depths of conviction. Behind the iconic cowboy mask, could he dare to abandon everything he'd earned to follow his heart? Step with us into the story nobody saw coming. A dream. Interrupted. While the world knew Ken Curtis as Festus, very few knew that music had been his first love, the passion that once defined him before Hollywood claimed his every waking hour. Long before the scruffy cowboy persona emerged, Curtis dreamed of the stage in a very different way. His heart belonged to harmonies, melodies, and the thrill of performing with a full band. Friends remembered him sneaking into local dance halls as a teenager, listening intently to swing and jazz records, mimicking the phrasing of the crooners he admired, and imagining a life where his voice could carry across concert halls instead of sound stages. Curtis's big break in music came unexpectedly. He joined a regional band that toured small towns across the Midwest, and soon his voice caught the attention of talent scouts. At one point, he was even considered to replace a major singer in a popular group, a role that could have catapulted him to national fame in music. In private interviews, Curtis confessed he felt torn. Hollywood was offering him stability and recognition, but music promised personal fulfillment, a life where his own voice, not a character's, defined his identity. As his acting career accelerated, Curtis struggled to preserve his connection to music. He kept a small piano in his home and practiced vocals for hours, composing songs he never intended for commercial release. Colleagues often noted that even on set, Curtis would hum melodies between takes, a quiet rebellion against the character who demanded constant attention. His musical ambitions became a private sanctuary, a reminder of the life he might have led if Hollywood had never intervened. Hollywood executives, however, had other plans. They recognized Curtis's charm and the peculiar magnetism of Festus and were determined to capitalize on it. Offers for television appearances, publicity tours, and fan conventions poured in, each opportunity demanding more of his time and energy. Curtis found himself at a crossroads: continue pursuing his musical dreams or fully embrace the persona that the world adored. He later admitted feeling a silent grief, mourning a version of himself he had to set aside, even as the character's fame soared. The tension between music and acting shaped Curtis in ways few ever noticed. Co-stars recalled moments when he would disappear after long shooting days, retreating to his piano or guitar, lost in the melodies only he could hear. In these private moments, he was not Festus. He was Ken Curtis, the musician, the dreamer, and the man quietly resisting the tide of typecasting. These glimpses of authenticity were brief but revealing, a testament to his dedication to preserving a piece of his true self. Curtis also experimented with writing lyrics, often inspired by the landscapes he had grown up with and the emotions that Hollywood never allowed him to fully explore. These songs, mostly private, were filled with longing, joy, and melancholy, a contrast to the comedic timing and exaggerated expressions of Festus. Some close friends later described these compositions as hauntingly beautiful, evidence that Curtis's artistic depth extended far beyond the cowboy persona. Despite these efforts, Curtis ultimately had to make sacrifices. Music could not compete with the relentless demands of filming schedules and promotional appearances. Yet even in compromise, he refused to abandon it completely. On weekends, he performed in small clubs under pseudonyms, seeking the thrill of an audience who didn't know him as Festus. These secret performances became a lifeline, a rare space where Curtis could breathe and reconnect with the identity Hollywood threatened to erase. Looking back, Curtis confessed that the intersection of music and acting taught him resilience and adaptability. He learned to navigate a world that often demanded conformity, finding ways to honor his passions quietly while fulfilling professional obligations. Music remained his sanctuary, a hidden thread linking the ambitious young performer he once was to the man who had endured fame, personal losses, and the constant reinvention of his public identity. Every note he sang in secret, every melody hummed behind closed doors, reminded Curtis that life was not defined solely by the characters the world adored. Even when Festus dominated screens across America, the music within him endured, preserving a private truth and a creative freedom no one could take away. What hidden ambitions lie behind a life so publicly defined? And how far will someone go to protect the dreams that truly matter? Stay with us as the untold details rise to light. A career he didn't expect. By the time Ken Curtis returned from his musical pursuits and processed the silent shadows of war, Festus had grown far beyond a simple television character. What began as a quirky improvisation evolved into a cultural phenomenon, a persona that audiences connected with so deeply it threatened to eclipse the man who created it. Curtis had long accepted that the character brought fame and opportunity, but few realized the psychological toll of living in a dual reality where Festus's world and his own overlapped constantly. The early signs of Festus's dominance appeared during the first season of the popular show. Curtis noticed how fans interacted with him off-set, often addressing him as the character rather than the actor. Invitations to fan events, autograph requests, and letters from viewers blurred the boundary between Ken Curtis and the scruffy, slow-talking cowboy. He later admitted feeling conflicted, partly flattered, partly trapped, realizing that the persona he had created for amusement now defined public memory. Curtis struggled privately with the loss of personal identity. The voice, gestures, and quirks of Festus were no longer just tools of performance, they were expectations imposed on him by millions. Any deviation risked disappointment or confusion. Co-stars observed that Curtis would sometimes rehearse lines in his own voice before switching back to Festus, a subtle but telling effort to preserve a sense of self beneath the demands of fame. This constant negotiation shaped his demeanor both on and off the set, forcing him to develop a patience and humility few viewers could perceive. Yet Curtis recognized the power of Festus. The character allowed him access to experiences, connections, and opportunities he might never have encountered otherwise. He was invited to perform at national events, appear on talk shows, and even mentor younger actors seeking guidance. While these moments were rewarding, Curtis confessed that he often felt like a guest in his own life, a man navigating fame while negotiating the boundaries of the identity he had created. Festus also influenced Curtis's creative instincts in unexpected ways. He began to experiment with subtle variations in tone, timing, and body language, expanding the persona beyond its original improvisational route. Audiences responded with unwavering enthusiasm, and Curtis discovered that the character could be a vehicle for nuanced storytelling, humor, and even emotional resonance. He carefully balanced the charm that viewers loved with glimpses of depth and humanity, ensuring that Festus remained both entertaining and authentic. The legacy of Festus was not just professional, it shaped Curtis's personal reflection on life. He often mused privately about the paradox of being celebrated for a persona while simultaneously yearning to be recognized for his broader talents. Letters and diaries from his later years reveal a man who embraced the inevitability of his fame, yet remained quietly ambitious, exploring music, private performances, and personal projects without fanfare. Festus opened doors, but Curtis never allowed it to fully define his creative potential. Interestingly, Curtis discovered that Festus's impact extended far beyond his immediate career. The character became part of the collective memory of American television, influencing subsequent generations of actors, writers, and producers. Curtis occasionally attended reunions or conventions and watched younger performers cite him as an inspiration. He expressed a quiet pride, tempered by awareness that the fame was inseparable from the character rather than the man himself. The duality of admiration and invisibility remained a persistent theme throughout his life. In private interviews, Curtis described a late realization. Festus had become a mirror, reflecting not just his performance, but his perseverance, creativity, and resilience. Fans laughed at the scruffy drawl, but the actor behind the laughter had endured wars, heartbreak, and the constant challenge of reconciling public expectation with private ambition. In that sense, the character was not a trap but a testament, a living record of Curtis's adaptability, courage, and enduring artistry. Ken Curtis learned to balance the fame of Festus with his private passions, relationships, and memories of courage. While Festus became iconic, Curtis's true legacy lay in the man behind the character, an actor, dreamer, and quietly heroic figure whose depth and creativity remained largely unseen. Were you stunned by Ken Curtis's confessions and the private struggles behind the man who became Festus? Share with us which revelation surprised you the most.